And it's it's amazing how much this science that we've been working on for the last 25 years is proving our forefathers right. And believe me, I never set out to prove Didi and BJ Palmer right. We were literally just interested in what a subluxation was and what effects of an adjustment of a subluxated segment, how could that change lives the way we saw that it did? So the cool thing about that is I didn't actually care how chiropractic care worked. So it didn't matter to me what results I got. I just wanted to understand, how does it work? What's going on? Why is a subluxation impacting people's ability to live fulfilling lives? And why does us touching people's spines and providing that little thrust at that particular specific site, why does it have such an impact on human health and well-being? So that's been the journey for the last 25 years for me. I graduated from the New Zealand College of Chiropractic. Yoo-hoo! We have some graduates in the room. And I also did my PhD at Auckland University in human neurophysiology. So I've been looking at the spine and the nervous system for the last 25 years. I originally grew up in Norway and then went to New Zealand for a 6-month visit that turned into like 35 years. So a bit of a weird mixture. That's where my accent comes from. The fast speaking and the swearing, that's just my own, fucked up mental health kind of thing. I really appreciated Jen and Simon talking about Heidi and her team. I know I get a lot of credit all around the world for the work that we're doing, but I have a whole team behind me. I think right now we have about 35 people just in the research centre at the New Zealand College of Chiropractic. So I think that makes us the world's largest chiropractic research centre on the planet. Pretty cool. And without this team, and especially some of these really, really amazing people that you see on the screen now, I wouldn't be doing the amount of research that I'm currently doing. Especially I want to point out Kelly Holt, who started 25 years ago with me doing volunteer work. I talked him into doing a master's and a PhD, and he is now my president. It's been an absolute blessing. I no longer have to justify what I'm doing, which is phenomenal. The other one I want to point out is in your far right-hand corner, Dr. Imran Khan Niazi, bioengineer, originally from Pakistan, met him in Denmark. And again, he saves me months and months and months in being able to collect and analyze data. So we've been studying what the subluxation is and the effects of our adjustments now for at least 15, 20 years. And the story that's coming out from this work is unbelievable. There's some really key references here that I'd highly recommend that you go to the journal sites. The little URLs are there, so you can go there, you can copy and paste them into your Safari or whatever, and get those research articles. They're worth a read. I'm only suggesting a couple. I know that most of you would probably rather pick your eyeballs out with forks than actually read a research article. I get it. But that's why you have people like me, right? That's literally my job, and I love it. My husband, Glenn, who's with me here today, he often tells me off for working. And I'm like, I'm not working. I'm reading about the, scientific properties, healing properties of Norwegian forest mushrooms, all I'm interested in is what is the latest science. But it's not just all about the science, because I think what makes us quite unique, us at the New Zealand College Research Centre, is that we're asking the right questions. And I think the reason we're asking the right questions is because we are chiropractors. Not all of my research team are chiropractors. I actually have 10 AI experts. Didn't even know that I had that until, a little bit recently. But it's knowing what you're doing. If you're actually practicing and you're seeing the changes that happen in patients in your practice, it's those kinds of questions that has driven our research for forever. I want to just ask you a question. How many of you in chiropractic have a spine model in your practice? Okay, spine model in your practice, hands up. Excellent. How many of you have a brain model in your practice? Yes, baby, we're getting more and more. I'm hoping by the end of today, if you don't already have at least one brain model in your office, you'll be ordering them online tonight. Because the story that's coming out from this neuroscience research is that a subluxation that's obviously in the spine, a vertebral subluxation, is interfering with the way the brain perceives what's going on in your body and the world around you. And I'm getting stuck on my own bling here. So we know that a subluxation is interfering with how the brain perceives what's happening in your body and the world around you, and every single adjustment you make is improving that brain's ability to perceive what's happening inside your body and the world around you. That's a big deal. So the story about chiropractic has got two components to it: the spine and the brain. So every time you're talking about the spine, you want to bring it back to the brain. Ideally, you'll have one of these spinal models also that has the little deep paraspinal muscles attached to them. If you don't have one of those, just go get some Play-Doh and pop them on and have some fun sticking them on there. And again, I'm hoping by the end of the talk today, at least, you'll appreciate why it's so important that we talk about these little muscles for multiple reasons. Not only because we know that they have a major role to play in both subluxation and adjustment, but also if we understand the impact we're having on these little muscles, and that our role as chiropractors is actually to exercise those little muscles back into proper function so your brain can accurately perceive what's going on and control the body better, then it changes the whole story with, well, why do I have to keep coming back to seeing you? Like, if you are going to go to the gym and exercise your muscles, are you going to go once or twice? Are you going to complain if you're not fit? If you're not looking like Paul Reed after 1 or 2 visits in the gym. Yes, I know. So me too. But, we also know that that's bullshit, right? You actually have to go repeatedly. And it's the same thing with chiropractic. I don't think it's a coincidence that the traditional, the really brilliant clinicians, their recommendations for taking care of patients tends to be exactly the same as if you're going to the gym. Isn't that interesting? So the whole science of exercise physiology, same thing, at least 3 times a week in the first 6 to 8 weeks, right? And then you could possibly sort of slow it down a little bit if you're reaching a better level of fitness. I think it's telling that that's exactly what we're doing as well. That's what coming out of the research is, that we're impacting those deep paraspinal muscles that are around the spine. So this is what the things that I'm hoping to get through with you guys here this weekend. So today, I'm going to try and cover this latest brain model. It's the contemporary scientific understanding of what a subluxation is and what the effects of our adjustments are. Understanding that brain model, it doesn't change how you adjust people, but it changes how you talk to people and how you explain what chiropractic is and the impacts of your care. It will change things like your care plans, explaining why your care plan is so important and why you need to see them frequently early on versus later on. I also want to talk about how ideally you incorporate this new science into practice. And a little bit tomorrow too, a little bit about why it's so important. Because what you tell your patients actually ends up influencing their reality in a real big way. And we're going to talk a bit about network, some of the research that we're doing, the latest research that we've been doing a little bit tomorrow as well. But I want to start with the brain model, because if you don't understand the brain model, then what I'm talking about tomorrow is just going to, blow your mind and will make no sense. And then I do want to talk about today why we need to see people so often in the early phase of care and whenever they're under more stress, physical, emotional, chemical stress. Really cool thing. Why that's so important that we understand. Tomorrow, I want to get into a bit more the power of even just a single adjustment session. The power that you have in your hands that we've now shown scientifically is unbelievable. And I really want you to walk away with this weekend with a renewed energy about what you have in your hands, your hearts and your minds when you check and adjust subluxations. Just how profound an impact that has on the central nervous system. It's quite unbelievable. I don't want you leaving here without knowing that. I want to talk a bit about where in the brain the changes are taking place and what that means for us. Because some of the latest studies that are coming out now are showing that we change conversations within the brain that are the seat of a person's reality, who they are. Last I spoke at my father's also a medical doctor. I was listening to the previous speaker. My dad was also a medical doctor. And last time I spoke at his rehabilitation center, where he's the lead doctor, was in front of physios and psychologists and nurses and all the rest of it. On the way home, he said to me, so Heidi, what I take away from this is when you do what you do, checking and adjusting people's subluxated spines, you're actually touching their soul. Now that just about made me cry. Because again, this is my dad, a medical doctor. We are touching people's souls. You are changing their reality and their belief systems, and you're changing conversations in their brains that literally shift who they are, how they interact with people, how they control their own body, how they interpret what's happening inside them and around them. It is pretty profound. I also want to touch on symptoms, because it's coming full circle. I know, this isn't necessarily the crowd that wants to talk about pain, but I also heard someone speak today that we need to meet our patients where they're at. Some of them are there because of symptoms, yes? Yes. It's really important that we're able to talk to them about their symptoms. What's really fascinating is a lot of the chronic musculoskeletal pain literature now are turning to alterations in proprioceptive input from the paraspinal muscles being the core driver of all the motor control problems that are well documented over the last 2 decades in these problems. Basically, what they're saying in their own neurophysiological language, they're saying that subluxations is driving the recurrence, the chronicity of a lot of these musculoskeletal problems. And again, understanding that our chronic musculoskeletal problems are also driving together with a lot of our mental health problems. They're now not necessarily seen as different things. They're just different aspects of the same maladaptive plasticity that occurs within the nervous system. Really, really interesting research. Again, indicating that subluxations is causing this downward spiral leading to chronic pain, chronic symptoms, but also to mental health problems, neurological diseases and disorders, and so on and so on. It's fascinating. These things develop together and they also go away together. And what you're doing when you're checking and adjusting spines, what we're seeing now, again in this network research that I'll talk more about tomorrow, is you're waking the brain up to actually genuinely pay attention to what's happening, and the brain recalibrates. And when it recalibrates, that's where the magic happens. It's not magic, but the brain suddenly realizes, I don't need to have this danger warning signal on, which is pain. I don't need to have these faulty motor control programs. I don't need to have this hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis on hyperdrive. I can switch off the parasympathetic, I can switch on the parasympathetic nervous system and switch off the sympathetic nervous system. So these are all the kinds of changes that can take place when the brain actually genuinely pays attention and tries to recalibrate. This is the beauty of the brain model of chiropractic that's coming out of the neurophysiology research that has been going on now for at least 25 years. I started this work in 1999 when I finished chiropractic college. How many of you guys, by the way, knew that we do change the brain? Anybody know who were the first people to publish that? Honestly, I knew back then that what we were looking at, I was like rocking my newborn baby girl with colic because I was so freaking stressed out, My little 3-year-old toddler running around the university, I was rocking my little baby girl, and I was controlling the computer in the experiments that I was doing for my PhD research, and I saw it. I saw it on the screen. I saw these lasting changes in brain function, and I knew that this was going to change the world. But there's only one way that we can change the world. If I sat quietly in my research lab where I was very, very comfortable, as opposed to on stage, right in front of people, no one would have known, right? And again, it's thanks to people like Paul and Heidi that invited me out to speak, and have all the state associations that have invited me out to speak so that I can share this story with you. It's no use us knowing it either, though, eh? We need to share this science, and that's the cool thing about it. It is a science that's actually supporting our original philosophy. It's unbelievable. In the latest review article that we wrote in 21 about this model, guess what we found out about the causes of subluxation, which is really the switching off of these little muscles close to the spine, when that's interfering with the way the brain perceives what's going on in the body and the world around you. Guess what we found as causes for subluxation scientifically? Trauma, toxins, and thoughts. Unbelievable. Some of those green books, I mean, one of my previous presidents at the New Zealand College, Phil McMaster, used to come running up to me with like photocopied pages from the green books, and it would literally match the experiments that we were doing in the lab. Unbelievable what these people thought of so many years ago with the science that they had at the time. I mean, I don't know why they are, in other schools, are shut away in cupboards and hidden away and not talked about. They were unbelievably intelligent people. I mean, even, Albert Einstein and Newton got a few things wrong as well. That doesn't mean that, we ignore them, is it? They should still be our heroes, and they are today. So I want to start with what the brain model is, as basic as I can. Again, major apologies. I know there's some little kiddlywinks in the room, and I'm bound to get a little bit too excited. But anyway, what we know is chiropractic care, and I've said it now already several times, but chiropractic care, and when I mean chiropractic care, I mean checking and adjusting subluxations. To me, that's chiropractic care. I know that's not universally viewed all around the world, but I know at least you guys agree with me, yeah? Yes, excellent. The saddest thing I find is when chiropractors write to me about cases and they've told me what they've done, and not once have they mentioned that they've adjusted someone. And I'm like, well, have you adjusted them? Oh, no, I was a bit afraid of doing that. I'm like, what the fuck? Sorry. Hello? That is what we do. And in New Zealand, everything at the New Zealand College of Chiropractic is about checking and adjusting vertebral subluxations. That is literally what the college is about. Anyway, chiropractic care, according to the research, is literally, when we're adjusting vertebral subluxations, is enhancing the brain-body communication, enabling the brain to more accurately perceive what's happening inside of us and around us. Our body receives lots and lots of signals all the time from the world around us. We've got our 5 senses, but there's also a truckload of senses inside our bodies about our neurochemicals and our hormones and neurotransmitters and pH levels and oxygen levels and mechanoreceptors, and there's so many senses. All of that also gets interpreted by the brain. Anybody same age or older than me will remember the days back in the 80s when we were growing up, 70s and 80s, that you mustn't do boxing because it knocks out your brain cells and you don't grow anymore and they don't develop. Anybody else heard that story? Do you remember those days? And then all of a sudden we learned that the brain changes, right? And this was really exciting to me when I studied neuroscience, was that the brain was changing. I thought it was constantly changing, but it's not. What's really fascinating is the brain needs certain things or conditions to be able to adapt neuroplastically and learn. Does anybody know what they are? Anybody know what we need to actually learn something for the brain to change? No, haven't heard the right words yet. We actually need a bit of stress. So you actually need a little bit of norepinephrine, epinephrine type neurochemicals released. You need focus. So you actually need to be paying attention to something, and you need good night's sleep. Really, really interesting. And I think one of the keys to us, why the adjustment is so important, is that actually does wake up the brain. It wakes up the alert system, which is, because, you can imagine it's a bombardation of those mechanoreceptive, proprioceptive inputs from these little muscles deep close to the spine that haven't actually been active for quite some time. So it's suddenly a blast of information from them. And I think the brain goes, whoa, what the hell was that? And then it actually genuinely pays attention, because this is what was interesting in the early 2000s that came out of the neuroscience literature that blew my mind away. I didn't understand it first. They were saying that the brain does not constantly take on board all the information that's coming at it from inside the body and from outside the body. It creates its own story. And that story is your reality. And that story is created in particular networks in the brain. And a very important network is the default mode network, which we've also already heard mentioned this weekend, which was really, really quite cool. But so I'm going to talk a bit more about the default mode network tomorrow. But I need you to know that our brains don't always pay attention to actually what's going on. It's why our beliefs are actually so important, because our beliefs, what we believe to be true, changes your reality, literally changes your reality. What you need to wake up that brain to then potentially be able to heal or change out of a maladaptive sort of process that might be going on for you, a health crisis, a diseased state or some kind, what you need is you need to wake the brain up so it can actually sense what's going on inside your body and recalibrate. And I think that's exactly what happens with our adjustments. And we have quite a lot of evidence to show and to prove that as well. So I'll keep going on and explaining this. This is actually the model that we have. It's got a few more bits that are going to pop in soon. But this is the model that we published in 2021. I got away with, if you actually bother to read it, this is one of the review articles that I put in the references in the beginning of the talk as well. If you bother to read it in the beginning, I define for you that this is a vertebral subluxation. It's what we chiropractors call a vertebral subluxation. But if you read the article, it's for neuroscientists. It was for the European Journal of Applied Physiology. So for the neuroscience community, I called the subluxation a central segmental motor control problem. It's a bit like, you know, depending on who you're speaking to, you change the words that you use. Like if I was at a party at a barbecue with friends and kids came over and asked me what I was drinking, I might say grape juice, right? Yeah. If it was a mate, I might say I'm drinking red wine. But if I was speaking to a sommelier, like an absolute expert in wine, I'd be going, this is a 1999 Temotu, red wine from, Wahiki Island, and it's got this and this blend and these grapes and all that shit. You with me? So for the research article, I used all those words because I could, because I'm speaking to a neurophysiology audience. But I've defined it up front in the introduction, in the methods, that what I'm talking about is a vertebral subluxation. So this exact model is there, but I've just called it central segmental motor control problem, just in case anyone gets confused if they start looking at it. I get into trouble wherever I go. Some places I speak, they don't even use the word vertebral subluxation anymore. I want to cry, especially when I'm at a chiropractic college. Isn't that disgusting? Hello, we're chiropractors. But anyway, so a vertebral subluxation, we know it changes the communication from around that area of the spine to the brain. And you might think that, if the brain doesn't know what's going on in that part of the spine, of course it can't control the movement of that vertebral segment optimally, yes? That makes sense. If the brain doesn't know what's going on at C2 to C3, how is it going to control the movement of C2 on C3 appropriately, yeah? It's going to struggle. That makes sense. But what gets really, really exciting is that the model is bigger than just the movement control of that segment of the spine. What we've also got in there is that it alters the way the brain interprets all other interoceptive, meaning from inside the body, and exteroceptive signals, meaning from outside the body. And on top of that, it's changing things like expectations, past experiences. We know from research experiments, when we're adjusting people, when we're adjusting subluxations in people, it literally is changing the parts of the brain that are responsible for making memories, retrieving memories, and altering memories. Anybody have those patients that come in and see you after a week or two and they're like, oh, I was never that bad? And you're like, it's in your own fucking handwriting. Like, what's wrong with you? Have you had those? Yeah. You know what? It used to piss me off because I thought, I'm really good. I've had this massive change in you and you're not acknowledging it. And that was upsetting me, right? But what I realize now is that we are changing people's memories. And I think people, if you've read about like Van der Kolk's work on can't remember the title of that book anymore, Van der Kolk's, come on, I'm sure there's someone else that read that one, about how memories get stuck in the body. The body keeps the score, that's the one. And I reckon when we're adjusting people again, you are not only then retrieving some of those memories that got stuck in the system, but you're altering them. So they end up with a different reality to the point that they even have different memories of what was going on. So I no longer get pissed off and upset with those patients. I pat myself on the back and going, I am brilliant. I have shifted this person's reality into a reality that no longer had the pain and the aches and the whatever else shit was going on in their life. Am I okay here, Matt? I'm still okay for time? And can't go past the black line. Okay, can't go back the black line. Got to listen to Matt here. I'm a terrible good girl that always follows all the rules. Anyway, can I kick it? So when we adjust people, what we're doing is you're blasting the brain with that proprioceptive information. We reckon it's waking up your alert systems, your homeostatic survival systems, a network called the salience network, which also has been mentioned this weekend already. So it's at least the second time you've heard it. And when you wake up that salience network, guess what the brain does? It genuinely pays attention to the incoming information from the body and the world around you. And you're working real hard on memories. Is this a dangerous situation? What can I do here? And I reckon that's where the brain recalibrates. Because you've got that sprinkling of the norepinephrine, you've got some focused attention on the body, right? The brain's going, holy shit, what's going on in this system? And it recalibrates. And by recalibrating like that, again, this is like, isn't this exactly what we learned, right? We don't, as chiropractors, necessarily heal the person, right? It's their innate intelligence doing it. And it is. The brain's going, oh, I've got this going on and this going on. I might fix this and I'll change that and I'll sort that out and I'll switch this, turn that off and turn that on. I mean, it's unbelievable, isn't it? Oh, I just wanted to have a big thank you to the dudes at the back of the room with the AV guy. Can we give them a big thank you for being here? Sorry, I have a really branched mind that goes all over the place at all times. What's really cool, though, is that we're not just changing the way the brain controls the movement of that segment, but we're also changing then the whole body proprioception, being aware of arms and legs and organ function and, internal organ function, and we might be changing memories of, who we are and how we fit into the world, how we control our body and our system, how we adapt and learn. It is unbelievable. 25 years now of research is supporting this model. This is the brain model of chiropractic. This is published in research articles. This was actually an invited review article. Do you guys have any idea how many published research articles support the bone out of place squash nerve root theory of chiropractic subluxation? 0. I have not found not one single peer-reviewed published paper that supports the bone out of place squashing the nerve root. Can we have squashed nerve roots? Absolutely, absolutely. What's usually a real clear sign that someone's got a squashed nerve root? They've got that radiating pain, yeah? And that's literally the experiments they've done. You've got to put so much pressure on a nerve root. They've opened up rats and shit and put pressure on those nerve roots. You've got to have so much pressure on those nerve roots that it causes the radiating pain. You've got to put more pressure than what it takes to cause radiating pain in these animals. And because of the way they, react to touch and pressure of their paws, you've got to put more pressure on them to interfere with that nerve root at all. And that's action potentials or axoplasmic flow or anything. So what does happen, though, right from the beginning when you start to interfere with that nerve root is afferent information back up to the brain. Really, really interesting. So the brain has been involved from the beginning. Way more impactful than the nerve roots. Why is this so important that we're aware of? Because you don't need to adjust a specific segment to have a specific impact on the nervous system. Every subluxation you're adjusting, I'll happily get into debates about primaries and compensations. I'm quite convinced about that just from 10 years of practicing, that there are some subluxations that are more important for an individual than others. Right? I like to muscle test. I feel like I'm using, my innate is asking your innate what I should do for you, I quite like that, and I get the best results when I, do that sort of approach as well. But anyway, I have no idea where I was going with any of that. There was a thread somewhere, I'm sure. So when we're talking subluxation, what are we talking about? We've got to talk about the spine, but then equally important, we've got to talk about the brain. Because there is so much evidence now for the parts of the brain that we change when we adjust subluxations. Oh yes, I remember now. So you don't have to adjust, T4 to affect the heart, right? Every subluxation can, in theory, directly affect the brain in the way the brain then is controlling the function of your heart. Every adjustment, when you're adjusting a subluxation, can impact the brain to alter the way the brain is controlling organ function, to alter mental health, to alter sleep, to alter movement control, to alter whether you have turned on or off the danger warning system. Because that, guys, that is what the pain system is. It is not a tissue pathology warning system. Pain is a danger warning system. Big difference, big difference. Pain is not a tissue pathology warning system. I'll talk a bit more about it tomorrow. It's a danger warning system. And I reckon being subluxated and the brain not knowing what's going on could very easily be interpreted by the brain as a danger. I don't fully know what's going on. I'm just going to make you hurt until you ideally get it sorted out by going to see a really good chiropractor. Anyway, so what is it about spines? Well, one thing that's very, very important is, you know, our spines, they move. I don't know if this is something that we talk about enough with our patients, but our spinal bones are supposed to move. Now, how do they move? It certainly isn't dancing skeletons, right? We need a few things, actually. We need muscles, yes? And we need messages to the muscles. So we need the brain. Another really, really important thing to talk about with patients is that we have loads of layers of muscles. Those deepest layers, the deepest layers that have been dissected away on the right-hand side, the deepest layers, they are small, they're tiny, they're close to the spine, the skull, the pelvis. Their main role is what? Proprioception. Their main role is sensory. Their main role, these little muscles, are not built to move shit. They're not. Yes, they're involved in stabilization, big time, but their main way they achieve that is by telling the brain what's going on. And then what the brain uses, it uses the bigger muscles that are, you know, physically more designed to move bones to actually move the bones. Yeah? Did you see those? Can I go backwards? I might be able to. So the little muscles are proprioceptive, sensory. They tell the brain what's going on. Now, it turns out that the brain really needs to know what's going on in the spine to be accurately able to interpret things like sound and visual information. Now, how cool is that? We've done experiments showing that when we are subluxated compared to people that are super, super healthy, nicely moving spines, they are less able to accurately interpret sound and visual information when we adjust their subluxations over weeks. Actually, even a single session makes a difference. The people are more accurately able to interpret sound and visual information. And again, I mean, anybody would have thought maybe that a chiropractic adjustment could influence hearing? I don't know. The funny thing is, in Australia, there's been a big, big attack on chiropractors not so long ago. And I was literally in Turkey in this massive neuroscience professor's lab called Kemal Turka, who was in Turkey, in Istanbul. And we were in his lab doing experiments on jaw function. Now, what controls the jaw? Cranial nerves. Excellent. Wonderful. What nerves are involved in visual information and auditory information? Cranial nerves, right? So this neurosurgeon, or was taking the mickey, taking the piss. You don't use take the piss over here, do you? You know what I'm talking about, right? I'm not talking about carrying urine from here to here. But anyway, he was literally going on national television in Australia, going on about how there's no nerves that go from the spine to the ears and the eyes. This is just ridiculous, right? And there we were in Kemal Turka's lab, literally doing experiments showing that we were changing jaw strength, biting strength, like so much that we had to even change the design of the study because the changes, the increase in strength was still there a week later. We directly impact the brain. But the brain is involved when you are interpreting sound and visual information. For example, if you hear a sound and you're trying to interpret where that sound is coming from, we're not changing the information going in the ears to the cochleas and then going to the primary auditory cortex in the temporal lobes. We're not changing that, but we're changing the way that information is being processed and understood by the brain. And the brain, funnily enough, needs to know where you are to interpret where a sound is coming from. Yeah? I mean, doesn't that make so much sense? Yeah. So that's how we've described it in the study, that the core of the spine probably represents the core of your body that the brain needs to be aware of to be able to accurately interpret sound, and the same thing with visual information. We're not changing the way information goes into the eyes and back to the occipital primary visual lobe, but then the brain has to interpret it, make sense of it, because the brain lives on a story. It creates a story. It interprets everything all the time. And it lives more on this story than it actually does reality. It's only when something really weird, a big sort of disparate, error signal comes in, does it actually pay attention. And I think that's what the adjustment is. It's that big wake-up call. It's that big, whoa, what the hell was that came from C2, right? And then it just, is checking everything and it's recalibrating, and all of a sudden you function better. It's unbelievable, right? But we've seen experiment after experiment after experiment. People can interpret sound and visual information. They can learn a motor task better. Like both the real healthy group and the subluxated group, and I'm happy to go into how we defined all of that. I looked through the literature and found a category. I didn't make it up, I swear. If say you were the subluxated group and you were the healthy control group, if you all learnt this motor task on this little iPad thing we had and you had to follow it with your finger, you all learnt the task. But only the healthy group, not the subluxated group, could remember that task 48 hours later. So they had learnt it. You guys hadn't. So what does that tell us about kids going to school? What are they doing? What are they doing all day? Aren't they trying to learn shit? Sport and stuff and writing and, it's eye-hand coordination, being able to throw and catch a ball, reading. I mean, that's a motor task of your eyes, right? And we found that, it's published, that the healthy group, they retained the motor learning 48 hours later, you guys didn't. This stuff is big, and it's coming down to these little muscles close to the spine and skull. Their function is way more important than we realized. This is why I said get your Play-Doh out and stick little muscles on the top of your spine so that at least you can explain what it is that we're actually checking for and then adjusting, and we're stretching those little guys. And when we're stretching them, we're actually exercising them. Because we know we gap the facet joints, right? When we go in and adjust people, we gap the facet joints and we increase range of motion. So it's better than a single session in the gym, right? Because you get the after effects. For as long as they're holding that subluxation, they're actually moving those little muscles again, and this information is sent to the brain. But it's really, really important to realize what happens. Like a subluxation that's gained today is not the same as a subluxation 2 years from today. This is also very interesting. This isn't actually even from chiropractic researchers. This is from real clever spinal physiologists like Paul Hodges and Lorimer Moseley in Australia. Australians come out with some really good neurophysiologists, but anyway, we need a brain. Yes, yes, yes. These little muscles are very, very important. Yes, yes, yes. What did we find in the literature turns these little muscles off? Unreal, eh? Physical injury, emotional injury for going into fight and flight, and inflammation, chemical injury, trauma, toxins, and thoughts. Who would have thought, eh? Anyway, really funny. Why might the stress system cause a subluxation? We don't really know. We just know that if you read a lot of the work by Lorimer Moseley, David Burke, they've written a book called Explain Pain. Fabulous book. The only problem is they don't really like chiropractors, so I wouldn't really recommend it to your patients. But if you read page 90 in their book, they talk about when we go into fight and flight, it's like the focus is on the bigger muscles to run away or to fight, and the little muscles, they go to sleep, the little muscles around the spine. But herein lies a bit of a problem, because over time, when these little muscles go to sleep, shit happens. They change. These little muscles surrounding a subluxated segment, they atrophy, they shrink. They become fatty infiltrated. They change their fiber type from being that sensory type fiber type to being the contraction type that fatigues very easily, very dysfunctional. We know that even the muscle spindles, the stretch receptors within them, become blunted to the ability to respond to stretch. So this is all known in the literature as maladaptive changes. Maladaptive muscular changes, not pathology. What have we always said as chiropractors, eh? We're not treating disease, right? We're we're improving function. And so even in the literature, it's talked about maladaptive plastic changes to these little muscles. And again, why is it so important that we have this conversation around these muscles? Because it explains why we need to see people more than once or twice. Yes, all sorts of shit and improvements can happen very, very quickly. It's unbelievable. I've practiced for over 10 years myself. I still have a license. I still adjust patients in experiments. So I'm still, one of the chiros that does the adjustments as well. I've seen these changes. I know what can happen. But, some of these changes within the nervous system also take time, yes? You've seen that, yes? Well, we've studied it, and we've seen it in experiments, in research experiments, how some changes within the nervous system take time. Some changes happen really, really quickly. And what we reckon is going on is that the early changes that take place when you adjust subluxations are the perceptuals, the perceptions, the ability to interpret sound and visual information, the ability to know where your elbow joint is or your ankle joint is, those straightforward perceptions, but more complicated neurophysiological tasks, like, for example, being able to take a real quick step and step on a panel that lights up. In this particular study, there was 4 panels around these older adults. And what we know from older adults literature is that they struggle with multimodal, multisensory information processing. So if they've got to process sound and visual information at the same time, it takes them longer. It's like they have to process one thing at a time, and they can't do it quickly together. So there's a light that goes up in one of the panels. If it's on the right-hand side, they've got to move their right leg. If it's on the left-hand side, they've got to move their left leg. They've got to step forward or to the side, depending on which panel lights up. So there's a perception, because you've got to see the light. You've got to make a decision about whether it's the right side or the left side, which leg you're going to move, and then you've got to move a leg. For the first 4 weeks of chiropractic care, the 2 groups, the chiropractic group and the control group, their results were identical. No difference between those 2 groups in their ability to take one of these steps. But at 12 weeks of chiropractic care, it was unbelievable the difference in the chiro group compared to the control group. It was unbelievable. The biggest change in that stepping task, way bigger than what's a classic, well-known study that's being used in, older adults and falls risk prevention programs, that came out of Otago, which was a 6-month exercise program that's still being recommended today. Our chiropractic study, 3 months of chiropractic care, way better results than 6 months of exercise. Pretty unbelievable. So more complex tasks, I think, take more time. But they do occur with repeated checking and adjusting subluxations. Because every time you are checking and adjusting subluxations, I reckon you're waking the brain up, the brain is recalibrating and fixing shit, and it knows way better than we do what it needs to do, and it does it bit by bit, bit by bit, bit by bit. It's also true, though, that people today are under way more stress, than previous generations. I mean, not future generations. We have a lot more chemical insults. Our food isn't all that great. We don't necessarily exercise the way we should. We don't necessarily sleep very well. I don't know about you, if you manage to mindfully meditate. I am absolutely fucking hopeless at it. But anyway, my brain doesn't like to stay still ever. It's always going to be doing things. But I think it's really important to be able to talk to patients about, why it takes time. And if we talk about it with our patients, that our role is to exercise these little muscles close to your spine, skull, pelvis. My job is to get them working properly so that your brain, because talk about spine, talk about brain, your brain, it helps your brain accurately interpret what's going on inside you and the world around you. And it will adapt and change. So, as I'm sure you know, when it comes to muscles, if we're actually going to exercise some muscles, that takes a bit of time and repetition. So it's a bit like, if you go to the gym, you don't go to the gym 3 or 4 times and then declare that the gym exercise doesn't work for me. I'm still fat. I'm still unfit. But I've been to the gym 3 times, for God's sakes. That doesn't mean that the gym didn't work for me, does it? It's a bit like that with chiropractic. It takes time and repetition. It's the same again with dentists when they put braces on our kids, right? What if you chose to put those braces on and then you took them off again after two days and then decide that, oh no, braces didn't work for me. You know, it takes time, it takes time. And what do the dentists do? They tell you up front, this is going to take, you know, I got a 2-year program on both my kids to get their teeth straightened out, and it's going to cost you this many thousands of dollars, yeah? Anybody else had that? Do the dentists not tell you up front as well? Yet we seem to be afraid to tell patients what's going on in their spine. And teeth are about aesthetics. You're talking about the kids' health and their life and their quality of life and their ability to know what's going on in their body, to control their body, to learn movement tasks, to be able to control their emotions, to be able to express their emotions. We know now we're changing parts of the brain that are literally represent a person's soul, how they view themselves as a human being, how they interpret their own emotions, how they interact with others, how they interpret other people's emotions. You know, there's a massive survey in America in 2012 that looked at, you know, it was actually written by alternative medical health professionals that designed the questionnaire. And the guys, Adams et al., I think it's 2018 or something, but it was done in 2012. Anyway, if you want to look that study up, it's really fascinating because there's a table there and it shows the most common things that patients reported occurred under chiropractic care. And it's like 60% of people say they cope better. They feel better. Someone else was talking about, I think it might have been Tracy, talking about, you know, patients want you to listen to them, to hold their hand and walk them through their health journey. There's a research article about that. They don't actually want you to fix their pain. That's not their number one concern. Their number one concern was that you would hold their hand through their health journey, that you would care about them, listen to them, and bother to walk that journey with them. Give them advice, you know, again, take care of them. But, you know, I used to think that I had to actually fix people's pain. Anybody else been like that? Or maybe not you guys, just me? Yeah, I know I'm pretty fucked up, but come on. You know, there must be some of you that also thought you had to fix pain, right? In the early days, I really thought I had to. And it took a patient of mine that really, really changed my opinion on that because I was sending this woman away. I was sending her away from my office. She would come in every shift I had. Every single shift I had, in comes this woman. And I'd tell her, I can't fix your pain. I tried sending her to a psychologist, you know, and they would like come back with some stupid fucking feedback that, you know, I wanted to shoot the woman. But no, sorry, shouldn't say that over here. Oh, God. Sorry, really inappropriate joke. At least someone's got a sick sense of humor like I do. Anyway, one day, you know, this is about 10 years ago now, this is when my career took off with all this research going on, and I really knew we were changing the world, you know, and I was out having to present this everywhere, and I was not very confident on stage, and like it was literally taken off. I was burning out badly. Went through a really bad divorce, awful. Long story short, I burnt out completely. I was written off for 6 months. So like I wasn't even allowed to, you know, watch television. It was too much for my mind. I had to candle gaze and shit like that. But anyway, can you imagine? Like, honestly, I burnt out so badly. But just before I did, what does stress do to the brain? Anybody know? Turns off your prefrontal cortex. That super important part that's responsible for so much, and I'll get into that a little bit later, especially tomorrow. But anyway, my prefrontal cortex was gone. And the prefrontal cortex inhibits inappropriate language. See how I'm still suffering, obviously. Inappropriate language, behaviors, thoughts, you know, the way you behave, tantrums, all that kind of shit, because kids don't have a prefrontal cortex. That's why you have tantrums in kids. But anyway, so this woman that I'd seen for like multiple years, and she'd come in for every shift. I just kept seeing her because I didn't know what else to do with her. I tried to send her to everybody else under the sun. They just sent her back to me. So I'm like, okay, I told her I couldn't fix her pain. But then one day, just before I was really, really bad, she comes in and she casually tells me that she had unsuccessfully tried to commit suicide the day before. Like casually, like it was no big fucking deal. And I was so far gone at that stage that I just burst into tears. I'm like, you can't do this to me, I love you, and you can't go try and kill yourself. And like I was appalling, you know, completely unprofessional, bawling my eyes out in front of this woman. Literally within a week, I was written off completely. So I witnessed a kid in a car accident, and it was like, I was fucked, you know. But this was my screwed up prefrontal cortex. It went about 9 months And I bumped into this woman again. And like, she'd lost half her weight. Like, she had gone to see this, she'd got some help, psychological help with the incest that she'd been through, and she'd left her abusive husband. And I'm thinking, oh, 9 months without me and she's doing fantastic. I thought I was kind of good, but anyway. And she goes, no, Heidi, no, it's all because of you. I said, what do you mean? I said, it's all because of you. I said, what do you mean? She goes, for the first time in my life, I actually felt like someone cared about me. Someone gave a shit. Someone would have actually cared if I wasn't there the next day. And I didn't realize that. I didn't realize that that's also part of what we do when we're working with human beings. Like, we are connecting to human beings and we're caring. In some of the research experiments we do, and like even to this day, she writes to me on Facebook, and she says she makes all her decisions. She's got Heidi sitting on her shoulder, and every decision she makes, what would Heidi want for me? Like, it's unbelievable. And that was simply because I was so screwed up that I let my emotions show to this woman. Like, it's unreal, eh? Just showing that you care. So that connection that Tracy was talking about, it's so true and so real. Like, yeah, we check and adjust subluxations in a human being. What are they interested in? What matters to them? That is such an important key aspect to get in contact with. And this isn't like this. The amazing thing is, even my research team are seeing this shit. In that study I was telling you about with the fast stepping task in these over 65-year-olds, we started to get letters written to us by like a 70-year-old and an 85-year-old and a 90-year-old who had been enrolled in this study because we were measuring these set things, but they also had all these other changes. Like, it's unbelievable what chiropractic care, that's 12 weeks of chiropractic care in a group of older adults that had never had chiropractic care before. It was unreal what they wrote to us. In some of the studies we've been doing stroke research. Don't even ask me how I've ended up doing fucking stroke research. I mean, Jesus Christ. We used to be accused of causing that shit, right? Not only do we not cause it, we actually help them function better. It's unbelievable. So in some of these stroke studies, we've got stroke victims that are literally coming in for chiropractic care. And, Imran, my Pakistani bioengineer that I told you about earlier on, he literally, he's been offered jobs all over the place, like King's College in London and, some of these amazing universities, several in the US as well. He's been offered jobs. He could go anywhere, but he is sold on chiropractic. He's a bioengineer. He's not a chiropractor. But one of the key things for him, and I'd been working with him for about 8 years when this happened, we were at a conference and he goes, Heidi, I've got to tell you a story just in case I can't manage to tell it from stage. And I'm going, okay, why wouldn't you be able to tell it? Because I might cry. And I'm like, fuck me. Like, this guy is the most stoic, beautiful person you'll ever meet in your life. Most humble, honest. Anyway, he tells me the story that one of these stroke victims was from his village in Pakistan. So they spoke the same dialect. And the guy told Imran at the beginning of the study, can you just kill me, please? I don't want to live anymore. Like, I'm getting very morbid. I'm sorry about this. But, it's just to show you that we touch lives at such a deep level that is even seen by the, nerdy researchers that don't normally interact with human beings anymore. And he was literally, at the end of the study, he wasn't moving that much better, but the guy was telling jokes and laughing. Like, Imran just said he couldn't believe it. He goes, I don't give a shit about your stupid politics. This is coming from a non-chiropractor. He said, what you do is you add quality of life back into human beings. You literally touch their souls and you change the way they interpret their own world and their own reality. To such a massive degree, it's not even funny. So don't ever take that for granted. We live in this world, right? We see this stuff. But even our researchers are seeing this stuff now. And they're so convinced about chiropractic. Imran's now on, I used to be on the World Chiropractic Congress's research committee. Jesus, that was political. I'm not really political. I like calling a spade and just telling the truth, telling it as it is. But anyway, after 10 years, I'd had enough and I quit. Imran's now on their research committee from us. He's a bioengineer. And he is more of a vitalistic, subluxation-based chiropractor when he talks than many chiropractors I have met. Anyway, won't go there. So I've got no screens going on. All I can see is myself. This is rather uncomfortable. I wanted to show you what this looks like on an MR image. Can we have that one up? Thank you. I want to show you what it looks like on an MR image. So for those of you who are students, what we're looking at is literally we're cutting through the spine, which you can see on the right-hand side is a schematic of it, right? So you can see the disc at the top, and then the spinous process is the bone that you can feel on your back, right, sticking out. And then right close to that spinous process and the transverse process is that black muscle, but there's a little white line, and that white line is fatty tissue, and it's meant to be there. So if you look at the normal image now, can you see the little white line by the spinous process? Can everybody see that? Look at how big that becomes in mild spinal dysfunction. That's about 3 or 4 times bigger. That is your muscle, the deep paraspinal muscle close to your spine and skull, atrophying. It goes all the way down the spine, right the way down to the pelvis. Look at it. That's the muscle atrophying and becoming fatty infiltrated. If you start looking at moderate and severe, you see how those muscles are more white or gray than they are black. That is severe dysfunction. There are more and more articles coming out now from the pain literature about the importance of these little muscles that I've been harping on about for 20 years now. And I think we need to own this science, thank you very much, because this is what a subluxation is according to the contemporary model. According to the brain model, when we get subluxated, these little muscles atrophy, shrink in size, get fatty infiltrated. They don't speak to the brain anymore. That makes it harder for the brain to perceive accurately what's going on inside your body and the world around you, so you start to dysfunction. Over time, you dysfunction more and more and more. As we start adjusting you, we are exercising those little muscles back into proper function so that your brain can accurately perceive what's going on, recalibrate, and start resetting things and correcting all the crap that's gone wrong. Is this not the old chiropractic story? With just a tiny little twist to it. So I hope and pray that you want to learn this wonderful science, because it is a very powerful model, because every single adjustment that you're making is changing the brain. Changing that patient's brain and the way they're interpreting who they are, how they fit into the world, what's going on inside their body, what's going on in the world around them, and how they should adapt and change. We're even changing their memories of the past. We're changing the way that stuff has become stuck inside of us because it's become part of our brain's story. And we are changing that default mode network. It is unbelievable. So this is real. I've got the reference on there for you if you want to. There's multiple studies like this out there. I'm trying to work with the Hong Kong Chiropractic Association at the moment to get some funding, because I got this dude, friend of mine in Hong Kong, who owns, I don't know, 20, 30 different MRIs, and he's got tons and tons of people that come into his practices, and we could get these MR images done for free, so he's willing to volunteer that. I've even got scientists that are willing to put through all the ethics and organize all of that for us. I probably only need about $50,000, which those of you who know me and know how expensive science is, it's usually a hell of a lot more than $50,000. But I want to look at checking and adjusting spines, and I want to see the changes I'm expecting to see based on this brain model. How long do you think I want to adjust these guys before I re-scan them? Actually, way more than 12 weeks. And can I tell you why? The first 4 weeks of any exercise program, there is no changes in the morphology of any muscle. That is known in the exercise physiology literature. Moritani et al., 19 something rather, very well known and studied. In the first 4 weeks of any exercise program, you do not change the morphology of muscles. So what do we change? The neurophysiology, the neuroscience, the connections between neurons. I think I have a video of that somewhere that I'd really like to show you. Bugger those. sound localization, we know all that shit. Let me show you this in images, because I think that's quite useful. Anybody else here visual learners? Yeah, so let's look at it in pictures, right? An injury, going into fight and flight, or local inflammation. What might local inflammation look like? Anybody adjusted people with an abscessed tooth? How they're just constantly upper cervically subluxated, like straight after you've adjusted them, until they get their tooth dealt with, and then they respond again normally to your adjustments. Very, very interesting. What is right in front of the lumbar spine? The gut. What do people have problems with? So many people have got a screwed up gut, yeah? Leaky gut, they've been on antibiotics, they eat the wrong foods, yeah? And they've got the leaky gut. So what might that local inflammation do? We know it can turn off the deep paraspinal muscles. Fight and flight, physical injury, local inflammation can switch those little muscles off. Soon as they stop talking to the brain, what happens? Confusion, right? If the brain doesn't know what's going on, how can it control what's going on? How can it control the movement of the spine? And if it can't move the spine appropriately, what might happen at those subluxated segments? Further injury, microtraumas. You know, if you're pulling a little bit too much on one muscle or not on the other one, you're going to end up with microtraumas. What does microtrauma after microtrauma after microtrauma end up with? Tender to the touch. What might happen to the movement of that segment if it's not being controlled properly? Abnormal intersegmental range of motion. What am I talking about? Subluxation indicators. Isn't this absolutely fucking beautiful? I just think it's so exciting. And a lot of this research comes from non-chiropractors, pain specialists. You know, it's really, really interesting. And they're starting to argue that chronicity and recurrence of many of our chronic problems are from reduced or altered proprioceptive signaling from the deep paraspinal muscles. In our world, that means subluxations. Subluxations are screwing up the way the brain controls the movement pattern of that spine. And again, guys, do you think that if the brain doesn't know what's going on in the spine, do you think that might affect your arms and legs? Has anybody noticed where arms attach? Anybody thought about where legs attach? You cannot move an arm or a leg if your brain doesn't know where the core is, where the legs attach, where the arms attach. Even chronic musculoskeletal problems like tennis elbow and knee pain and hip pain and all that kind of crap is probably, it could be that you might need to adjust a hip or a wrist or an ankle too. I'm not saying you don't do that if you want to, if you like doing that. But if you are ignoring the spine, I think you are doing them a disservice. I even sat in a research conference once with a group of scientists, chiropractic scientists, and they were arguing or presenting their study that showed that knee manipulation did not help knee pain. They said chiropractic did not help knee pain. And I asked the question, what was your chiropractic care? And they told me, knee manipulation. And I said, and? And they said, no, knee manipulation, only knee manipulation. And I said, well, maybe you should change your conclusion to say that knee manipulation doesn't fix knee pain. Are you with me? Yeah. It's a big difference, right? There's research going on now, you wouldn't believe it, where they're arguing that specificity doesn't matter, where they've got one physiotherapy group manipulating a joint and another physiotherapy group manipulating where it hurts, and they have no difference between them, and they're saying that, oh, that means specificity doesn't matter. What the fuck? Are you serious? But you need people that see the research like we see it. We see it through the chiropractic lens. We've done a study where we used the activator, because I don't believe, maybe you can, but I don't think I can, put in the same thrust to a subluxated segment or to an unsubluxated, a healthy segment. I don't think I can put the same force into a healthy joint that I can a subluxated segment. We've trained for years, right, to put that thrust in to the subluxation, yes? Yes. So we use an activator. We had 2 chiropractors decide and mark on the spine where they were subluxated and where we agreed that they had a healthy movement in a joint, right? So, no indicators of subluxation. And then they were randomized into getting the thrust delivered at the topmost subluxated segment or the topmost unsubluxated segment. You with me on that? We only got the changes in the prefrontal cortex in that N30 set peak that, anyway, that doesn't really matter, in this little squiggle that I've shown in 8 different published research articles, changes when we adjust subluxations. So specificity does matter. It does. You only got the brain changes when you're actually applying that thrust at the subluxated segment. Why might that be? Probably because a thrust delivered to a joint with healthy, plump, nicely moving muscles and a freely moving joint is probably going to be slightly different than putting a thrust into where these muscles, there's inflammation, they're stiff, they're fibrotic, they've atrophied, they haven't been moving for a while. If you're putting in a force there, of course it's going to be different. Like, duh, yeah? I mean, what are we doing? I mean, do you guys manipulate where people hurt, or do you actually check for subluxation and adjust to subluxation? We adjust for subluxations, right? Isn't that what makes us different? Yeah, but we have academics out there that do not see the world the way we see it and are trying very, very hard to create glorified physiotherapists and calling them chiropractors. Anyway, I'm getting a bit political, shouldn't go there. Right, when we are subluxated, it turns off these little muscles, it stops talking to the brain. If the brain doesn't know what's going on, how can it perceive and control what's going on in the body? It can't. So it doesn't accurately know what's going on inside and outside of the body, and therefore it's got poor body control. Visually, does this make sense? Yes. So this is where your chiropractor comes in. This is where the adjustments come into it. And this is where I've talked about the facet joints, they gap. We know you stretch those little muscles. We know that happens. We know you get increased intersegmental range of motion. That is going to move those little muscles that haven't been moved for quite some time. So this is why, when we're checking and adjusting people, it's going to take a bit of time, because in the first 4 weeks, no morphological change in those muscles, I don't think, right? Because that's what every other research study has shown when it comes to exercising muscle physiology. But what I do want to show you is this one. So what is happening in the first 4 weeks is changes to neural pathways. The pathways are probably there and probably have been there, but they may have been switched off. If your muscles aren't moving, aren't speaking to the brain, there are pathways that dwindle away, and synapses even dwindle away and die. But when you strengthen a pathway, see how the synapse grows. When you're strengthening pathways, they develop stronger, so they speak to each other faster and faster. This is neural plasticity. There's many types of neuroplasticity. If you're not using a pathway, those synapses can even dwindle away and literally not even be there anymore. This also explains why some types of changes in the nervous system take time. Because if you've lost a pathway, you can't immediately get it back. You can't immediately get it back. You can grow that synapse again, but it's going to take time and repetition. Does that make sense? So I think it's a very important type of visual to show patients that the changes with chiropractic care can take time. And what we're doing is exercising these little muscles back into proper function. This is where that story also becomes so important. Because if patients don't know that their brain creates a story about their reality that may not be true, herein also lies a bit of a problem, right? So this is the absolute latest cutting-edge neuroscience. This understanding about the brain and its own story has only really been around for the last sort of 10, 15, 20 years, and that's actually not a long time in neuroscience. It usually takes about 10, 15 years for new scientific discoveries to become common knowledge. But this is where we need to be, I believe, on the cutting edge. This network research that we've been doing lately that's coming through now too, that is real new. That's only 10, 15 years old, the methodology. That's where, if I didn't have the team that I have with Imran and his people, I don't know where I'd be. But over the last 25 years, we've done study upon study upon study showing what happens within the central nervous system when we're checking and adjusting people. And they're better able to know where their arms are, where their legs are. They're better able to move their arms compared to being subluxated. They're better able to control spinal muscles. They're even better able to rotate mentally objects in space. And we need to mentally rotate objects all the time just to be able to interpret our world. And our mind works faster. And we know communications within the brain change. So for example, being able to, for the cerebellum to talk to the motor cortex, we've showed multiple times that changes. We've shown changes in the way the brain sends messages to muscles. It's a bit like your brain's got handbrakes and gas pedals to all your muscles in your body, and it's got this fine-tuning system. You know, I don't know if anybody else drive around with a handbrake on max sometimes? I'm not a very good driver, but you know, if you release the handbrake, have you noticed that it's much easier to drive? It's the same thing too if you're controlling the body, if you're controlling muscles. You can press the gas pedal and get stronger, right? Or you can release the handbrake and get stronger. And we've shown in studies, beyond any neuroscience doubt, that we change those handbrakes and gas pedals to different kinds of muscles in the body. This is over 25 years of work. Study upon study upon study. In the lab of the likes of Kamal Turka, that, you know, super well-known neuroscientist. You know, and that's where our validity comes into it too. Like, it's so important that we are working with non-chiropractic scientists, but it's equally important we have chiro scientists on the team to interpret what's going on. Because it's only us that see the world the way we see it that can ask the right questions in these studies. Anyway, moving right along. So when we are adjusting people, we're actually setting up and stretching those very particular deep paraspinal muscles around the subluxated segment. Those little muscles that haven't been moving or talking for however long they've been subluxated. And some people have been subluxated for a lifetime, right? It's remarkable when you start working on a person like that. Like these older adults in our study. It was unreal, the changes that they were getting that we were not documenting in the research studies because you're only measuring certain things. But anyway, so we're stretching these little muscles. You're blasting the brain. The brain wakes up. It wakes up its salience network, its homeostatic survival system. We have solid evidence that this is what happens when we're adjusting subluxated segments. And when you wake up the salience network, we know the brain is genuinely paying attention. The brain can't stay in salience network though, which is why it has to change its story, so it needs to recalibrate quite quickly, and then it changes its story, so it changes its reality, changes its programs, changes its motor control programs, might change the way you sleep, the way you relax, how you've got your autonomic balance, how you've got your hypothalamus pituitary adrenal glands functioning, your gonads, how all of these different hormones and neurotransmitters are working in your system can be shifted when we're adjusting people. And so when the brain is more accurately aware of what's going on, it has the capacity to change and more accurately perceive and therefore control the whole system better. This is what you've got in your hands every time you're checking and adjusting someone. And tomorrow I want to talk to you about just the power of a single adjustment session, how we've compared that to people doing other experiments, which is it's quite remarkable. So, oops. I'm not even getting through half my slides, but I know that doesn't surprise anyone that's heard me speak before. I can only apologize for that. But this brain model of chiropractic is far more impactful and profound than the old bone out of place squashing a nerve root model ever could be. Because you'd have to adjust a certain part of the spine, right, to impact a certain part of the physiology. Whereas the brain model says that no, every subluxation that you're adjusting is changing the way the brain perceives what's going on and can control the system. Meaning that it's most important that you find the subluxated segments and that you're adjusting those. And you know, you could be adjusting the sacroiliac joints and you could be affecting the heart or lungs or, you know, the cool thing is we don't really know yet how someone is going to respond to their adjustments, yeah? I wish we could. And our AI team, our 11 AI experts are literally looking at that right now. They're looking at, can we identify Because we can feed into the very, very clever computers that we've got, massive big computers. We've got a whole fucking room of computers. It's unbelievable. This is way over my head, but they can feed in, like, we've got 300 channels of surface EMG. We've got 60 channels of EEG. We've got this over 12 weeks of chiropractic care. We've got a control group that is, again, all these measurements are done in them. We can feed them in all the things that they've said to us, all the patient-reported outcome measures over time, and we can send this into these computers and find patterns of what changes. We know exactly who got adjusted with what adjustment at what segment at what day. We can start to pick out all the people that got a C2 and see, is that doing something, or is it all individual? We don't know, but this is the beauty of where we're at. We're even starting to look at, this is something that really excites me, I've wanted to do it for at least 15 years, we're starting to record EEG from the chiropractor and the patient at the same time, before, during, and after. How exciting is that? Anybody here think that intent might matter? I mean, that might be what differentiates chiropractors like us from people that just manipulate where someone hurts. If people are just manipulating where someone hurts, that is honestly anti-scientific, because we know that pain is a danger warning system. It's not a tissue pathology, alerting system. So it doesn't actually make physiological sense. It makes far more physiological sense that we should be checking and adjusting subluxated segments. Makes far more physiological sense. Anyway, how do you incorporate this science into practice? It becomes a key part of evidence-based practice, which is you talking to every single patient about what chiropractic care is and how it might help them with whatever they've come to see you for. And that science part of it is only one of 3 equally important pillars. Very, very important. 3 equally important pillars. Your clinical experience and patient preferences, all 3 equally important. But I'd really love you to be able to share this science with patients, and that is literally why we've created an entire library, online library, for you with resources to share the science. Everything I've talked about today and a shit ton more. We've also, in case you wanted to learn deeper, because I don't know if you've looked at the certainty literature and the confidence about being able to present shit confidently, the better you own it, the better you know it, the more confidently you will communicate it. And the more confidently you can communicate it, the easier, and with clarity, the easier a patient is going to understand what you're talking about. And if they understand what you're talking about and they like you, then chances are they will continue to see you. And that is the goal, not for the money, well, the money too, but for those patients to get that chiropractic care so that their brain is continuously aware of what's going on, so that they can process information at its best and they can maintain the best possible health that they're capable of having, considering all the burdens that they've got on them. So there's so much on there. We're just going to skip all of that. We're going to skip all of that too. With our library, we've not just got then the resources that are for the patients, and this is the science translated into lay language. And we've done a huge effort into this. It's taken us about 10 years of building this library with everything that we can think of that might be important, including this, the care, the frequency of care, which I've run out of time to be able to talk to you about. The short story is, guess what? Early on in care, what's necessary? More frequent adjustments. You do better off even up to a year later. Unbelievable, even if you just adjusted for 6 weeks. In low back pain and in cervicogenic headaches, the more frequently you're seen, the better off you are up to a year later. And then you look at all the basic science research that we've just talked about today, that our role is exercising those little muscles. Well, it makes sense, doesn't it? Because the more frequently you're adjusting them, the better those muscles are going to be functioning, the better their brain's going to be functioning. And you can even look into maintenance care as well, which is another thing I wanted to talk to you about, is guess what? Maintenance care patients do better. I'm in shock horror. But there are actual scientific experiments that show this. And I don't know about you, but it helps me an awful lot if I'm sharing scientific facts with patients. I know science has been under a little bit of attack lately, but really good, well-done science still holds a lot of weight in our current world. But more important than that is what? How we connect to another human being. Totally agree with that. It's that connection, that human connection, and giving a shit, and being really good at your technique as well. Anyway, I've got so much more to talk to you about, can't you tell? So much more to talk to you about. And I'm going to be talking to you about way more than this. Where am I now? Yeah, see, more frequently, much better. There's heaps of evidence there. And And I'm very good at speaking very fast, but not that fast. Really looking forward to tomorrow when I'm going to hopefully blow your mind away with some of this latest network research that we've been doing, which Paul was talking about early on this morning, about how it impacts our mental health, which is really interesting, anxiety, depression, fatigue levels, and sleep. And diving deeper into where we're going into baby studies and these intense studies. But I do not want to take a second of Billy D. I adore Billy D's presentations. He swears more than me, eh? Yeah? Very